finally exit the European Union on January 31, 2020, what will the eventual divorce mean for Africa? South Africa, Nigeria, Kenya, and Egypt, Britain's Africa top trading partners, are largely going to be affected, both positively and negatively. Here's the bad news. Trade and investment will be affected. Most of the trade arrangements the UK has with the African countries were negotiated through the EU. This means the agreement will cease to apply or will have to be renegotiated when the UK finally leaves the EU, a process that may take years. The UK may no longer shape and lead some of the most important initiatives on the African continent that form the basis of cooperation between Europe and the continent. The emerging markets and frontier asset markets will be affected too. South Africa, a former British colony, and some of Africa's advanced economies could be hard hit. African companies listed on the British Stock Exchange may also suffer losses. The UK's Africa trading partners may experience slower economic growth as a result of potentially weaker trade and investment ties, thereby leading to less job creation and higher unemployment. An independent Britain with weak currency may discontinue its assistance to countries such as Ethiopia and Sierra Leone that rely heavily on British aid. In 2016, for example, Britain provided over £1 billion in aid to 6 African countries: Ethiopia, Nigeria, Sierra Leone, Sudan, Tanzania, and South Sudan. It may review that spending if it becomes an independent country from the EU. Now let's focus on the good. Countries like Zimbabwe and Libya, currently under EU sanctions, may get a review and possibly re-engage with Europe. Britain will be able to focus on bilateral relationships with Africa and traditional partners for its needs rather than looking at it through the prism of the EU. Britain could in the future decide to deploy its own troops to troubled places on the continent without waiting for the EU. Africa's trade with Europe, estimated at 106 billion euros in 2016, has been eclipsed by China, estimated at $300 billion between 2005 and 2014. British FDI in Africa was estimated at $56.5 billion. But there could be an increase in FDI inflows into Africa if the UK exits the EU. Britain will also be able to directly finance projects in Africa through its international aid program, such as the Department for International Development, instead of contributing to the European Development Fund before committing to other investments. Good or bad, Britain's exit from the EU will come with a mixed bag for Africa.